Today on Talk Fulton, Fulton police track their numbers as it relates to the demographics of their traffic stops. We'll tell you what they found. And we'll show you how they're using community policing initiatives to build relationships between law enforcement and the public. I'm Yvette Jones, and Talk Fulton starts right now. We're talking today about the topic that is galvanizing national attention: police interaction with the public. This conversation is nothing new for Fulton County officials. In fact, in 2002, Fulton commissioners passed a no racial profiling resolution, and since then has it had law enforcement agencies provide a routine report to track how each of them is faring when it comes to incidents with minority populations. Chief Gary Stiles with the police department has been a part of this reporting process since the very beginning. Welcome to Talk Fulton, Chief.
Thank you.
Now, when this reporting started 13 years ago, how did the process begin and what exactly were you being asked to track?
Well, 13 years ago, when the Board of Commissioners passed the resolution forbidding racial profiling, the department was put in a position of doing a lot of internal review and review of their processes. And what was interesting at the time was, through the entire history of the department, there had always been, from the chief's office on down, a more or less a trained aspect of only stopping people based on suspicion of their activities. So what we took was the national standards that were available at the time, which were very few, mostly from the Department of Justice, recommending that we track our traffic stops in particular and determine whether there was any bias on behalf of the officer when making the decision to stop somebody based either on race, ethnicity, or gender.
Now, we're going to get a little deeper into that, but tell me now, which county law enforcement agencies are involved?
The county agencies are the Marshal's Department, the Sheriff's Department, and the Fulton County Police Department.
Now, what were some of the early findings?
Well, early on, when we designed the program, we decided to do things that were completely different than we saw anywhere else in the country. And one of the things that we accomplished was that we decided that the officers would report the race of the person being stopped, the age of the person being stopped, the gender of the person being stopped, as well as whether a search was conducted or not, and whether a citation was written. We had the officer do that over the recorded radio to the dispatcher. The dispatcher was recording the information as the stop progressed or occurred. This gave us a very detailed and very accurate picture of what the officers were doing. Our early findings were, of course, very general. It showed how many African Americans were stopped. The age range based on Department of Justice recommendations were actually too broad. They ranged from 16 years to 49 years and didn't give us a very accurate picture.
Now, in early August, you reported to the commissioners about the effort to obtain deeper analysis on the department's data as it pertains to traffic stops. Let's take a minute now just to listen to a portion of your report to the commissioners, and then you can explain more on the other side of this.
And of course, this is interim, but there are some interesting findings that are coming out. We agree that there is a place for knowing the overall demographics of the community that you serve. There's a lot of uses for that, and sometimes it can even be helpful in analyzing some of this data. But in general, if you're using stop data, it is best to use stop data based on the population of the major roadways that you are conducting your stops. And one of the things that you will see when our reporting process is completed is you'll see that this police department spends less than 1% of its time on interstates. We don't have time to be on the interstates with the call load we've got. So the population, for example, of I-85 north and south in reference to our stops has a much smaller impact than if we had, say, 30 or 40% of our stops there. Our main thoroughfares, such as Fulton Industrial Boulevard, Old National Highway, Cascade Road, and offshoots of those, such as Flat Shoals or such as Patton Drive on the Fulton industrial side, those demographics are not always static. Fulton Industrial grows by 25,000 people, 12 to 18 hours a day, 5 days a week. That population may not reflect the overall live-in population of the county. GSU is doing surveys on those. Those have not been completed, but we will be including that in our final reports, and you will be getting adjusted percentages that show just what you're saying, Commissioner. Will show the average demographic for that stop population rather than the overall population. Now, we have found that some of it mirrors pretty much what the census says is the population, but that is in the denser, more urban environment areas up in the Old National Corridor where they're so densely populated. But it's very true that it doesn't hold all the way through. But one thing that's been very interesting, originally we were required, and this was a federal recommendation, that you reported ages 16 to 49 as the stop ages on average. Well, last year I was unhappy with that, and I had my analysis staff start doing individual analysis, and it's quite time consuming. But what we found is by breaking it down from ages 25 to 22, 21 to 19, and 19 to 16, you'll see a very different picture than what the perception is. And a good example is that we stop 16-year-old African-American males less than 1% of the time. African-American females get stopped less than 1% of the time. The numbers are actually 0.80 for males and 0.74% for females. In all, in that 25 and younger category, those stops represent in total less than 14% of all of our stops. That's an interesting comment, I think, on the possible age of our motoring population, but we're really going to analyze that a lot closer. And I was rather surprised because I too had the perception that we did a lot more stops in the younger ages.
Wow, that was an earful. You said quite a lot. Now, first explain who's doing this report and what information specifically are you hoping to ascertain?
Certainly. A little over a year ago, I entered into a conversation with Georgia State University's Criminal Justice Department. And I've been working with Dr. Dean Dabney with Georgia State University. What's important about that is Dr. Dabney is well known in the community of racial profiling legislation, as he has been the author of the state of Georgia's proposed legislation a number of times in the past. He suggested that we use his PhD candidate department to conduct a survey of our best practices, our overall practices, and analyze all the data that we have collected going back as many years as we could produce. And I believe that right now the best data goes back at least 5 years and probably more. Mm-hmm. Coming out of that, Dr. Dabney is going to make recommendations as far as what we do well, what we could improve on, modernizing how we collect the data, and of course training. We provide annual training to all of our officers, and I've asked for recommendations of how we could improve that training to ensure that the department is not only preventing biased based stops, but also encouraging officers to self-reflect a little bit about the things that we think about and why we would stop people. We want to make sure that we are constitutionally protecting the public, as well as protecting the public in a way that makes sense.
And it seems like you're really taking a holistic approach to this, and that you're ahead of the curve in this regard. Now, I heard you say a couple things to the commissioners. You used two words that were interesting to me. They were interesting and surprising. What was interesting to you, and what were you surprised about?
Well, I think one of the things that we, as people, tend to do is we tend to let perceptions drive reality for us. And I think multimedia, television, Facebook, and all these modern forms of communication unfortunately help support perception as reality. And I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I would have made the assumption that this department stopped a lot more teenage drivers than the results actually showed. So this has been a good exercise, not just for me, but for my command staff and also for my officers as well. When the final report comes out, it will be part of our training program.
And do you think that those numbers were surprising to you because your officers are already going in with that more holistic approach and thinking about why they're making certain stops and being a little more comprehensive with it?
Well, I do believe that the reason those numbers are the way they are is because our officers only make stops based on reasonable suspicion or probable cause or witnessing a violation.
Well, we're going to talk more about this when we come back, more with the chief about his department's relationship with the public. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been talking today with Chief Gary Stiles from Fulton County Police about the department's statistics. Now, I wanted to ask you, sir, about your thoughts about the department's relationship with the public it serves. And I think this plays well into what we were talking about earlier, perception versus reality. How would you characterize your interaction with the public you serve?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that in the 30 years that I've been with Fulton County, the relationship with the public is nothing short, in my mind, of remarkable when it comes to law enforcement and the public interacting and being transparent with each other. From the very first day that I became a police officer with Fulton County, I noticed a very big difference from the department that I had recently left, and that was that we had officers even 30 years ago attending homeowners association meetings, forming neighborhood watch groups, and constantly in touch with members of the community. They knew our officers. We were instructed to get out of our cars and meet citizens, go into businesses, and introduce ourselves as people, not just police officers.
Building those relationships, that's the foundation. Yes. Now, the commissioners mentioned that some of the things that have happened in other cities with law enforcement have not happened here. To what do you attribute that?
Well, I think there's a number of factors. And with today's situation of instant communication and 24-hour communication, sometimes it can be a matter of there but by the grace of God. But basically, I believe the reason that this department does not have those issues is because of the fundamental values that the police department has had for the entire 40 years that it's been reformed by the Board of Commissioners. And that's in its mission statement. It states the usual, which is preserving life, preventing crime. But in every case, at the very end of that, it says in a partnership with the community. And that has been there since the beginning, and it's not just words. It is actually the way the police department has always operated and still does.
And it's something that is ongoing. It's not just something that happens in the aftermath of some event. It seems like you're building those relationships year-round, every day.
That's quite correct. We attend hundreds of homeowners association meetings and hundreds of neighborhood watch group meetings. We do them after hours during the week. We attend them on the weekends. I recently received the latest invitations to neighborhood block parties that are occurring on the weekends.
Now, I'm sure events like National Night Out help in that regard as well. The department joined the rest of the country in participating this year. Let's take a look, Chief.
Police, the Sheriff's Office, the Marshal's Department, and the Fire Department joined residents for National Night Out. The annual tradition highlighted community involvement and public safety awareness. The helicopter, robot, and high-tech vehicles were on display, and law enforcement brought an important message.
We just want you to know that every day we do whatever we can to protect and serve you.
This year was particularly important for residents to have a meet and greet with law enforcement.
Especially in these days and times where in some communities there seems to be tension between law enforcement and the community. we pride ourselves in the fact that we are the community. And this is an example of how the police department, the sheriff's department, the marshal's department, the fire department are all part of the South Fulton community.
National Night Out was filled with music, entertainment, and food. Commissioners also spread the word about free county resources available.
I love it. I love that we get to meet and greet our elected officials, our police department, and all of our neighbors and friends that we live, work, and play around.
This is a great event. It's really positive for the community to interface, to mix and intermingle with the local authorities. It's really a positive thing.
Interim Police Chief Gary Stiles says once again this year was a success, but next year it will be bigger and better. Reporting for FGTV, I'm Priscilla Ortega.
It looked like a lot of fun for your team, Chief. Tell me about it.
It is a lot of fun, and we've participated for a number of years. The National Night Out is the one night that is picked throughout the country for public safety and law enforcement to get together with their community and celebrate the relationship and build on the relationships that they have. We bring all of our specialty equipment that we can fit in the parking lot. And it's just a great time to bond further with the community. And other than the fact that it is always the hottest day of the year, and is quite hard on both the citizens and the staff, it is always a good time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, before we go, we wanted to congratulate you on the department's accreditation success again this year. Explain to everyone what determines whether your department is accredited.
Well, thank you, Yvette. I appreciate that. The department first became nationally accredited in 1987. We were the 14th department in the state of Georgia, and we were the 45th department in the United States to become accredited. This past July, I had the honor of receiving our 9th reaccreditation.
Wow.
And what that means is that from 1987 forward, we have had a group of professionals review our standards. There's over 480 of them that we must comply with, not just in a file somewhere, but we must demonstrate by on-site assessment that we in fact do what we say we're going to do. And they're all based on best practices in public safety and law enforcement. And it really is a very, very in-depth process. So each time we go through this, which has been every 3 years you would go through an assessment, each time we go through it, it involves the entire department. The assessors take comments from the community. We're very proud of the fact that the assessors are amazed at how many citizens come to the forum that they have during the time here. They have one night where they meet with the citizens, and they always comment that we have some of the largest numbers of citizens show up to comment, and it's always positive. The other thing that we're proud of is that because of our national accreditation, it was very easy for us to obtain the state certification that exists for departments that don't want to or have decided not to go through the national process. So we're actually accredited from 2 agencies, the state of Georgia as well as the national organization, which is CALEA.
Wow. Well, it seems that you are leading by example in so many different ways, and we congratulate you on that. Any final thoughts you have today for us, Chief?
In this time where there is so much turmoil that is going around the country based on incidents that have happened in other cities, I would just say that I'd like to remind people that because something is happening in another city does not mean that there is a problem with their police department. We ask only that we be judged by the conduct and quality of our officers and not how somebody else acted in another city.
Great parting words. I thank you so much, Interim Chief Gary Stiles. It was a pleasure having you today. Thank you so much for the insight and a closer look at Fulton County Police.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing more about Georgia State University and the police department statistics. Thank you once more.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Well, that does it for this edition of Talk Fulton. A special thanks to Interim Police Chief Gary Stiles, and of course, a special thanks to you for watching. We invite you to email us to let us know what topics you'd like to see addressed on Talk Fulton. Email us at fgtv.feedback@fultoncountyga.gov. I'm Yvette Jones. We'll see you next time.